Report finds major United Kingdom religious institutions expose millions of children to abuse. So just to be clear, we are clapping because this is a major inquiry into the problem that will help address it, okay? A recent inquiry...
I don't know if our editor includes the clap. So when you say you're clapping and the video gets cut, people are like, what are you talking about? So so we have to mind that. Okay. Actually, maybe we should ask our video editor to include the clap. Yeah, all right, let's continue.
A recent inquiry into a wide range of religious organizations based in the United Kingdom found a number of issues in how such organizations handle abuse allegations. The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, or IICSA, examined child protection within 38 religious institutions within England and Wales. According to their report, the group had, quote, significant or even dominant influence on the lives of millions of children. It was also found that religious leaders deterred reporting of abuse to protect the reputations of the organization, and that victim blaming was a part of the tactics used to silence allegations. The inquiry provided several case studies from various religious groups, including Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Alexis Jay, chair of the inquiry, commented, quote, religious organizations are defined by their moral purpose of teaching right from wrong and protection of the innocent and the vulnerable. However, when we heard about shocking failures to prevent and respond to child sexual abuse across almost all major religions, it became clear many are operating in direct conflict with this mission.
Is millions? It says millions. Really, millions?
Well, so it's millions of children that are a part of religious institutions, not necessarily victims.
Mm-hmm. How many victims do we know?
Not off the top of my head. And it's like within what time period?
You look. It says the Guardian says millions of children in religious groups in England and Wales vulnerable to abuse. Okay, so I don't know how you define vulnerable.
Well, because they are within institutions that do not have good practices to prevent such abuse. So something one statistic was it found that actually, no, you give your commentary while I find
I wonder if there's any statistics that, because I'm almost sure that this is going to be heavily the numbers are going in religious institutions is going to heavily outweigh non-religious institutions. However, I don't know if actually this is what my guess is, but I want something to point to as data. Okay, like, is there any data that shows that compares the amount of abuse children are exposed to in non-religious institutions, adjusted per capita, compared to religious institutions, right? Like, is there a study like this? I hope there's. I
think there's something similar for America. I'm not familiar with the United Kingdom.
Right, because I mean, if I was biased in favor of religion, I could always come and say, like, well, children are vulnerable in non-religious institutions as well, right? Like, it's not just religious institutions. Here, oh, look, here's my anecdotes. Here's an example in this school. Here's an example in this school, right? So what we need is to do a comparison side by side with, institutions that are not religious in nature, and not just total number, but just per capita, to show that religious institutions seem to be a lot more dangerous. Children in religious institutions seem to be a lot more dangerous. And I also want to know if I'm biased, right? Maybe because we constantly report on abuse against children in religious institution, I have this false idea that this happens a lot more in the religious institution. I don't think I have that bias. I think, like, based on everything we've seen, but I'm happy to change my mind if this is not true, right? I do want to see a side-by-side comparison to be able to say that with something to refer to as, yeah. What are you going to say?
Well, I think in the United States, I remember seeing basically a Catholic kind of apologist website saying that, and I wasn't able to verify this myself, so be skeptical. But something that basically like that there's actually a higher rate of public school teachers per capita that are guilty or involved or alleged, whatever it was, to have abused minors more than Catholic priests. That would be a different, though, because this is over a broad 38 different religious institutions, right? So it's a much broader sample or population that we're dealing with here. But it was shocking. The report found that roughly only 37% of religious settings had up-to-date criminal checks on people who are have access to children. So a minority of the institutions had up-to-date background checks on people who were around children. I was able to read a little bit of the report today, and a shocking number of institutions. What I don't like about the report is that it doesn't actually, what I saw of it doesn't give you numbers that are crunched. It kind of gives case studies throughout the report. But there was a shocking number of institutions that had no policies on the books in regards to child protection or reporting mechanisms. The report did a really good job explicitly calling out religious hypocrisy, and they call it as such in very strong language. And here's a quote that I think Armin will enjoy. So, under the section titled Risk Assessment of Those Who Offend, quote, forgiveness is central to the teachings and practices of many religions. However, care must be taken to avoid creating a culture in which the encouragement of forgiveness results in safety concerns and the assessment of risk to others being overlooked.
Wow, they're actually talking about this whole notion of forgiveness in Christianity being a toxic thing that actually encourages sin and gives you a license to do things that are evil. See, this is what this is what I've been telling you guys. There's nothing in Christianity that says this is okay, but there are other things in Christianity that indirectly is responsible for more actions like this. One of them being the license to sin with this doctrine of everything being forgiven through Jesus Christ, right? So this is why a lot of things that seem positive about religion, like, oh, religion has good teaching, like what? Oh, like forgive everybody. Like, oh yeah, you think that's a good thing? Like that's basically a license to do the most horrible crap in the world, right? That's like, oh, I don't care how you judge me. I've been forgiven through Jesus. Like and also to whitewash all forms of sin as if they're all the same, like make it all equal. Like in Christianity, the way you look at it, like, oh yeah, somebody steals a gum, somebody lies to their mom, and somebody else commits genocide. A sin is a sin. All sins are forgiven through your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and it's all good, and again, that gives you, especially people who think they're men of God, will feel less, that thing, that the natural feeling that you have that reduces evil acts in some of us, holds us back because we have a conscience. That is like the effect of that is lessened by this idea that you think that you will be forgiven through Jesus. That has a very harmful effect. Again, there are other reasons why religious institutions promote will result in child abuse. One of them being this undeserved authority and trust that religious leaders are given to without any credentials or because they're seen as man of God, good men of high morals that can be trusted with children, and this false notion that these people are trustworthy just because they're man of God, and encourages more parents to just accept that this is a good place, this is a trustworthy place to put children in and trust these people with. If you look at same institutions in another place, the way that the people are trusted with children, they have to go through hoops that men of God, so-called men of God or women of God, don't have to go through, right? So that by itself encourages more child abuse, even if there's nothing in scripture that promotes child abuse. I mean, it does, but not in this way. But again, that's amazing that this report actually refers to forgiveness as something that is okay. I feel like I wasn't talking nonsense all this time. Hannah, by the way, is saying something that I think, like in the Facebook live chat, I think a lot of people don't get, right? Hannah like says it happens everywhere, not just religious places. Yes, Hannah, it's not about the fact that guys.
We're not claiming that. It's about these organizations are claiming to have moral superiority or a monopoly on morality, and they are failing to uphold their supposed tenets and missions at every possible step. We're not making the claim that it doesn't happen. Oh my God, I can't even engage with this.
Yeah, and it's not just that. Even if it was no hypocrisy, okay, it's the relevant. It's the how, like, in comparison, how much. Of course, it happens in other places. Who claimed that it doesn't happen in other places, right? Like it's as if like saying like, oh yeah, in let's say for example, going to a country where women's rights are being abused in such dramatic ways, and other people coming like, well, it happens other places as well. Yeah, but in this place it's happening more. There's a significant bigger problem here compared to other places. That's the issue. Like, you can't just be like, well, it happens other places. Yeah, but this is why people don't understand. Like, people just look at everything in such a simplistic black and white. They don't understand that there's different levels that you're dealing with, right? You have to look at things relative to each other. It's not a binary thing. We're not talking about, yes, it does exist here, no, it doesn't exist here, and there's nothing in between. Everything is in between. Okay, you have to think. You have to come out of that binary mindset. It's not just yes, no, on, off, good, bad. Okay, it's bad and worse. It's good and better. Life is mostly gray. It's not black and white. You have to judge things relative to others. You have to look at numbers. You have to look at stats. You have to look at reports. You have to, when you're looking at numbers, you can't look at total numbers. You have to adjust it based on the population. You have to control for external factors. Okay, so this is, guys, come on, look at things with a little bit more nuance. I know it's a bit cringe to ask for nuance, but I don't care. Just be a little bit. Things are not that as simple as a lot of you in the live chat make it seem. Yeah, anyways.
There was some other stuff I wanted to talk about this report. So I encourage you guys to go look it up. You can find it freely on the IICSA website, or for free. And I wish that they gave us more statistics and numbers, but what was really interesting to me is like Zakuro is asking, why are children always unsafe in religious institutions? And part of it is to do, at least with what this report found, was that many religious institutions had completely out of date child safety policies. So if they did have a child safety policy, it was often completely out of date. And people who were in charge of managing these religious institutions literally said, they were quoted as saying, really, this is something we just was checked off once a year and put back in a file cabinet to say that we did it. So many religious institutions, it's not something that is actually actively engaged in and ensure that they're being followed to a T. In some institutions, the policies might be in English. Meanwhile, leadership or the majority of participants might not be native English speakers. So the policies and practices that are outlined aren't actually accessible to them. Like this was the case in Gujwara, where they didn't have these policies available in Punjabi. What's also very interesting is they outline a lot of the attitudes that thrive in these religious institutions that perpetuate the abuse. So, for example, one of them is the fear of external reporting and reputational damage. So a lot of institutions will explicitly put the reputation of the religion above the safety of members. For example, here's a quote, in many cases, concerns about external involvement are connected to a desire to protect the reputation of a religious organization. Mrs. Hurst described how within the Jesus Fellowship Church, quote, the reputation as a church was above all else. In Mrs. Ratu's experience, religious institutions operate as, quote, gatekeepers to hide the abuse, keep it under the carpet so as not to affect the reputation and status of a family, an individual, or a community. And so on the same point, Mr. Humphreys noted that, quote, the perceived reason for placing responsibility for the abuse on victims and survivors is more, in my experience, more about the need for individuals to protect the reputation of the church institution and maybe even God himself. So to speak out about this issue, you are damaging the church, you are damaging God's reputation. So these are some of the attitudes that are in communities, that are often in communities like this, that obviously create an environment that makes it very easy for this stuff to continue and not get addressed. They also talk about how there, in some institutions, there is actually a dislike or fear of secular or statutory services. So this is infamous in the Jehovah's Witnesses. They are extremely suspicious of people outside the organization and delegitimize the services that they provide, or the processes, the legal processes that they should be going through. And they try to delegitimize them and basically say that we actually know God's way and this is how we should do it. And we actually have everything we need already to handle it ourselves. We don't need to alert the authorities. And there's instances in the case of the JWs where there was a leader or an elder in the community who's known to have done horrible things to people. And they thought that they handled it internally. But then what ended up happening was that person ended up going out into the community at large and abusing children that were not a part of the JW community itself. So that self-interest actually, not only does it severely damage people within their organization, but it can lead to it going far outside of that particular community. You know, you can't be this self-interested when dealing with these matters. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, this answers a lot. I mean, that goes again to what we're saying. Like these people, the whole idea of we got this, we have God. That is what putting children at risk. Like religion is directly responsible for this. This is not,
well, especially the JWs. They're like explicitly a destructive cult, and they are very authoritarian in their claims that they are God's one perfect institution. So any failings within that organization is a huge crack in the wall of dogma that they've built inside their practitioners. And they can't allow that crack to really, spread, and then the dam will just, burst open.
right. Interesting.
So yeah, I really want to dig into more of this report, but we do have to move on. But this was super interesting. And I think there's going to be more follow-up. What I did enjoy was them talking about, they had offered a lot of solutions, but when they were talking about the failures of all these organizations, they made sure to mention how much material is actually publicly available that they could have taken advantage of, right? So they're not saying, oh, this is difficult. The standards and the updates that we've made to these policies that they should be abiding by, they're not like, they're like, no, these are freely available. We extend them often. They should be up to date. And one good thing is, because they went out of their way to make this inquiry, a lot of these organizations are bringing themselves to a proper standard because they got cut out for it.
Guys, I just want to let people know how much Susie takes time into digging into these research and nerd it out and come out and analyze it for you guys. And she does a lot more homework than I ever could, and she's so good at researching the information, and she understands the studies in a way, because she had actually, I don't know if a lot of people know, that's her background in doing research and analyzing research. So we are so lucky to have her here, because she goes and finds these reports and then explains it to us in a way that we don't have to go and read. I mean, you can if you want. By the way, there's a link to all these studies here if you want to go read it yourself. Link is in the description. Link to this article is in there, and then you can find the research as well. But I just find it so helpful when Suze goes and spends so much time doing so. You have no idea how much work she does behind the background. A lot of people don't understand how much work Suze does behind the background. You have no idea. You guys should be very grateful for her doing all of this. Anyways,
Well, you also
yeah.
like do so much studying, you know, like I know it's a joke that you don't do anything, but that's not true. Like you spend so much time learning just so that you can have like a more expansive commentary. It might not be
Thanks.
specific to that news, but like that's not nothing. You
Well,
deserve
thanks.
appreciation for that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Hey guys, if you're a fan of Blasphemy and Sexy Callie, you know, like me, then you need to be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, link in the description below. Because if you subscribe, we will send you a free copy of our Blasphemous Art ebook. And let me tell you, it is the tastiest blasphemy that you can find anywhere available today. And we are so generous with our blasphemy that we continue to send you more blasphemy every week. So make sure to subscribe, link in the description below.